To the untrained eye, the only similarity between the MCU and the 80s cult classic Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is that they're both movies that appeared in theaters. That's really about it. More specifically, it would appear as though the only similarities between the Ant-Man franchise and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is that they happen to deal with shrinking humans. That's the extent of it though, right? Wrong. There's actually a solid case hinting that these two titles exist within the same universe and actually have more to do with one another than you might think. It all comes back to Hank Pym and his weird, confusing little particles. Those puppies are the key to this whole Honey, I Shrunk the Superhero premise. He's so gosh darn secretive about what he's up to and how it all works. Why is that? I mean, I guess there's constantly bad guys trying to steal his tech and use it for the wrong reasons. That's a pretty valid reason, I guess, for wanting to keep things on the low.
Absolutely.
But he won't even tell his protege Scott Lang, the actual Ant-Man, how it works. I mean, he does give him an explanation, but we don't believe it. We think that there's some white lies in there that Hanky Boy is spewing. To better understand this theory, let's look at the part of Endgame where Scott Lang initially starts to understand the concept of time travel. He thinks that it works just like it did in Back to the Future. Tony Stark has to correct his misconception and explain how time travel actually works.
So Back to the Future is a bunch of bull.
I mean, how it actually works in the MCU at least. The other crazy, complicated scientific concept that Scott has to comprehend was, of course, the Pym particles. Originally discovered and developed by Hank Pym, they can alter the size and mass of objects or even living beings. They're the key in what turns Scott Lang into Ant-Man. Judging by what we know about Scott Lang, it would make sense that he also relies on his movie knowledge to understand this complex scientific function. The reality is, we're never told the explanation for how Pym particles work. Hank uses Honey, I Shrunk the Kids logic as an explanation, but that's only to appease Scott. He knew that using a popular 80s movie would register in his newfound companion's head, so he just went with that rather than try to actually explain the science behind it. After all, that would probably have fallen on some pretty deaf ears. In Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Rick Moranis plays inventor Wayne Szalinski, the creator of a shrink ray. He explains how it works by saying, quote, "All matter is made up of not only density, but of empty space. And if we can proportionally reduce the amount of empty space in any given object, we can, thereby, shrink the object. In easier terms, it works by squishing the atoms together, thus making things smaller." Look, I'm no scientist, but something doesn't quite add up about that explanation. That can't be how it works. Because if you're just getting rid of the excess empty space, but keeping all the same atoms and the same mass and density, then the weight of an object wouldn't change. Sure, you could theoretically shrink and grow things, and people, but the weight wouldn't change in that case. Ant-Man shrinking down and running around Tony Stark's Iron Man suit would still feel like a 180-pound man. And increasing or decreasing in size wouldn't actually affect the person's strength or speed or abilities. If that is in fact how it works, then it would just make them big or small. I'm not sure how it does work, but I know that that's not the real explanation. I do know that the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids explanation is pretty much the same way Hank Pym explains the Pym particles to Lang. It's almost like he chose an explanation that he knew that Lang would accept, not to mention an explanation that would keep the true answer a secret. That's not how Pym particles actually work. Not only did Scott Lang buy the bogus reasons, but we did too. The audience was none the wiser, and we just accepted that response as well. Hopefully, as things progress in the MCU and time travel and, the whole quantum realm becomes a larger part of the overall storyline, we're gonna get more and more accurate details about how it actually does work. And look, I don't blame Hank Pym for being so protective about his particles. In the first Ant-Man movie, he's essentially hiring a guy to help him steal back from the guy who stole his research. It's understandable to be a bit weary and not want to risk it falling into another set of the wrong hands. Plus, on top of that, the guy helping him is a convicted criminal who's a known cat burglar. He steals for a living. What's to stop him from also stealing Hank Pym's prized achievement? Pym knows he's dealing with a shady character who wouldn't even understand the explanation if he tried giving one, so it's all around just safer to protect it. Now's the time where I should remind you to subscribe to ScreenRant and to turn on those gosh darn notifications. If you're watching this on mobile, just go into your YouTube settings and hit mobile notifications, and you're all set. Now back to the video. Did you know that there was almost a very real crossover? According to Peyton Reed, the director of both Ant-Man movies, they tried to get Rick Moranis to make a cameo, but things didn't work out. Moranis famously walked away from acting years ago, so landing him for the role would have been a massive ordeal. With the brand of humor that Ant-Man films have become notorious for, a Moranis cameo would have fit in perfectly. It didn't happen in either of the first two Ant-Man movies, but there's still more to come in the pipeline, so maybe this crossover still has a chance.
What do you take me for? A complete idiot?
Here's another fun fact. Did you know that Marvel almost made an Ant-Man movie in the 1980s as a way to actually compete with Disney's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? This was way before Disney owned Marvel. That acquisition only happened in 2009. One of the main reasons that Disney made the move was because they wanted to monetize Marvel's intellectual property in motion pictures. I.e., Disney wanted to take the comic book characters and make movies about them so that they could make lots of money. I'd say that plan worked out pretty well. That wasn't the first time that strategy was thought up, though. In the 1980s, a company called the New World Communications Group purchased Marvel Entertainment with a similar goal in mind. The big difference between that instance and the Disney one, though, is that Disney already had a boatload of money to work with. New World did not. They were a relatively small film company and kinda had no idea what to do with the characters that they just purchased. Not to mention that all the crazy special effects and CGI that we're used to today just didn't exist back then, so making a superhero movie was a lot harder. At that time, only the biggest movie studios could afford to produce a proper superhero movie.
Wonderful. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, rather than produce these big-budget, high-production value films, New World decided that they were going to focus on characters and their personalities a bit more. They liked the wacky superheroes, the ones that they could build weird concepts around or even make fun of the entire notion of superheroes with. Silly stuff like that. One of the few films that they actually produced before selling Marvel in 1989 was a Punisher movie that didn't even have the famous Punisher skull uniform. Needless to say, it wasn't very well received. Imagine purchasing Marvel and having the ability to make a movie about pretty much any character that you'd like, and the only movie that you produce is a Punisher movie without any of the comic book Punisher elements to it? They say that hindsight is always 20/20, but how is that not a glaringly obvious mistake even at the time? One person at Marvel who loved the idea of getting some new bosses, especially ones who were interested in developing some movies, was your boy Stan Lee.
This is the answer.
He had been trying to get Marvel characters on the big screen since the 1970s, but kept coming up short. Apparently, he kept coming back to one character in particular that he thought would translate well to a feature-length movie: Ant-Man. I'm not sure why he preferred Ant-Man over some of the company's more popular comic book characters, but something about the humor and the special abilities just felt right, I guess. New World was on board too, only they couldn't really move too fast due to budget issues. They took their time with the project, and as a result, Disney beat them to market in 1989 with a movie called Teeny Weenies, which was later changed to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Once it was clear that they weren't going to beat Disney to the theaters, they dropped the project altogether. Can you imagine what a 1988 version of Ant-Man would be like? Odds are it would be a slapstick-style comedy, which was pretty popular at the time. Because it was produced by New World, it would have been relatively low budget without many effects. It definitely wouldn't have been anywhere close to the MCU version that we all know and love today. Heck, there's even a chance that there wouldn't even be an MCU version of Ant-Man today if there was a previous version in the past. Judging by New World's one attempt with Punisher, I'm not so sure that their Ant-Man project would have been so successful. There's even a chance that a failed Marvel movie in the late 80s would have affected Disney's decision to buy Marvel and start making movies altogether. One failed Ant-Man movie 2 decades ago could have easily derailed the entire MCU as a whole.
It's really important to me that Cap never finds out about this.
So, in a way, it's a good thing that it never happened. And it's a good thing that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids did happen, because we now have the foundation to build the Ant-Man franchise around all these years later. Crazy how things tend to work out like that, isn't it? Well, what do you guys think an 80s version of an Ant-Man movie would have been like? Who would have been your ideal casting in the lead role? I don't know why, but I'm picturing Michael Keaton. That could have started the whole Marvel versus DC debate decades earlier. Let us know who you'd pick in the comments section down below. Before you go, make sure that you smash that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to ScreenRant to stay up to date with all of our latest releases. Until next time, bye!